That was our extra question 4. Good morning, kids. We are continuing with extra question 4. And up to some part we have written and we were left with the remaining part. Up to A horizon we have completed. Now we need to write for B horizon and C and the bedrock. The layer below A horizon has a lesser amount of humus, has a lesser amount of humus but more of minerals, It is generally harder and more compact. It is generally harder and more compact. And it is called B horizon. B horizon or the middle layer. Just below this A horizon it will be present. So these are the names given for B horizon. Of course, no doubt humus will be less. It is more compact, you can say more solid, it's not that porous as A horizon is. But it is really a good source of minerals. Now the C horizon. This third layer is made up of small lumps of rocks. Is made up of small lumps of rock. Such questions will come to you for 5 marks, wherein you are supposed to write down all of the soil profile. With cracks and crevices. With cracks and crevices. It's a cracks and crevices all the way same only. And last but not the least, we have to know about the bedrock. Below C horizon is the bedrock. Which is hard and difficult to dig with a spade. Which is hard and difficult to dig. It's actually very, very hard. And honestly speaking, has got no role for the development of plants or for being a habitat or living place for the small insects and animals. But without this bedrock, the other layers cannot be present on it. That is all we need to cover about the soil profile. And after writing down this, we are going to understand about the next heading, that is about the soil types. And we are going to understand those three and we are going to write for them. That is what our today's work is in the class. The main target of today's class is please try to note down and take a screenshot if you have not noted down till now, so that we may continue with soil types, that is 9.3. And those kids who have already written this, please have a look and start reading for soil types, heading number 9.3 on page number 99. Have you completed? Have you completed writing from the board?
Noted, ma'am.
Okay. If you have not noted, please take a screenshot.
Noted, ma'am.
All right, Nitya.
Noted, ma'am.
All right. So let's move ahead. Move ahead and now I'm going to rub the board and we are going to deal with the next heading, that is the soil types. Now let's try and understand for the soil types. There are basically three types of soil types we are supposed to deal with. The names are clayey soil, sandy soil, and the loamy. Once again, the three names we can recall: clayey, sandy, and loamy. And in this category, the first one, say for example, if you want to deal, that is the clay soil. As the word itself indicates that it has more content of clay in it. More content of clay. The particles are very fine, like the soil profile I had shown you in my last lecture. That was from the clay soil only. Most of it will have very fine particles, and due to that they are very close to one another, compactly arranged, and of course they have water holding capacity, which is very good in these types of soils. Clay soils I'm talking about. Clay soils are actually good to grow for, say for example, rice, wherein the crops need more and more of water retention. Sandy soils are just opposite to that of the clay soil. Sandy soils will have particles of the soil which are larger in size. Now, if these particle size is large, that means that in that case there will be gap between the soil particles. And this sandy soil allows the water to percolate down. That means if in a tray you are keeping clay soil and in another you are keeping sandy soil, and you allow both the samples to have one mug full of water, then in clay soil you will see that it has absorbed all the water and it is not allowing the water to percolate down, only a few drops. Sandy soil, as it is present in and around us in Rajasthan, Rate, that sandy soil has more and more components of this sand, And due to that, what happens that the water that we supply cannot be retained, cannot be remaining in the absorbed form. The water goes down. Therefore, try to check on it. There is a usual statement that there are seas below the deserts. See, even if it rains there and rains very, very heavily, it cannot retain the water. Whole of the water is going to go down. That will be like far, far away from the reach of the plants. Now that definitely for that water it has got no use to the plants. So therefore, in desert there are no plants, no vegetation. Third category, loamy. Loamy soil contains a complete composition of these two, clayey as well as sandy. And due to that, what happens that loamy soil is actually excellent soil for the growth of many, many crops. What is the reason? Clay soil is going to absorb water in that case, and sandy soil will allow the holes or the pores in that are really good for the breathing purpose of the roots. So, loamy soil all in all is going to be the best out of the two. Clay soil in day-to-day life, in general walks, in general talks, we call it as kali mitti. That is very smooth, very fine particles, and water holding capacity is too high. Now we are going to write about the next question, and that is about the soil types. This is what we have covered, and we are going to write about that only. And this is the heading number 9.3 we are talking about, and that is soil types. And here we have our extra question 5 based on the explanation a moment ago I did. That is explain various soil types. First, we should know the definition of the term soil. The mixture of rock particles and humus rock particles and humus is called the soil. Is called the soil. Now the various types. The first one or the A part of it, that is the sandy soil. Sandy soil. If soil contains greater proportion of big particles, it contains greater proportion of big particles. So therefore we are calling it as sandy soil. particles cannot fit close together, cannot fit close together, they have large air spaces between them. They have large air spaces between them. Water drain quickly. Water drains quickly through these spaces. So basically they won't be like wet. So of course, sandy soils are light. They cannot be heavy because they do not contain water. Well aerated, that means air, a big amount of air. Well aerated and dry. Whenever you're talking about sandy soil, try to keep the desert sand in the mind. You'll be able to write clearly about that. Now we'll be writing for the second type, that is the clay soil. Now how to write on the spelling? You write on clay first and then EY. Clay soil. It contains the same language I'm using here. The first line gives the definition of it. It contains greater proportion of fine particles. Fine particles. Clay particles are much smaller packed tightly together and leave little space for air. Little means almost like no space. Leave little space for air. So if there is no space as such, it can absorb water like sponge. Now this sentence, it can hold water. That means it can keep it absorbed. So basically, clay soils are heavier. It can hold water. Therefore, it is more heavier. Now, the C part of it, that is the loamy soil. Are you writing for loamy soil now? And that only will be the written work today, this last question, and we are going to go for more of the explanations now. One extra question per heading we are trying to keep. Now here the C part of it. Loamy soil. It is a mixture of sand, clay, and silt. It is a mixture of sand, clay, and silt. I'll explain you about this silt. What is this SILT, silt? The size of silt particles, the size of silt particles is between those of sand and clay. Is between those of sand and clay. Loamy soil has humus, loamy soil has humus and the right water holding capacity. The right water holding capacity for the growth of plants. For the growth of plants. Now, by the time we are writing, we can also try and understand about this last word we have dealt with, that is silt. SILT, silt. We have understood about clay, we have understood about sand. This silt basically is how to identify this silt if I am talking about. That is, of course, present use one term, river bed. That means Once the water flow with a great speed, it carries some amount of top soil with it. And these particles, they settle at the base of the river. Once these rivers they flood, definitely all the type of soil will be washed in the river, and the rivers deposit this at the river banks when they overflow. So all in all, how we have understood is that clay particles are very, very small, fine particles. Sand particles are just opposite to clay particles. They are
मैम आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही।
मैम
मैम मैम की शायद नेट चला गया। हाँ मैम आपका कैमरा और आवाज नहीं आ रहा।
कुछ नेटवर्क प्रॉब्लम होगा।
मैम का शायद नेट चला गया। हाँ पर मैम के तो वाईफाई लग रहा है। पता नहीं, वो भी कभी कभार चल जाता है, इसलिए चला गया होगा। मैम का मैसेज आ गया, नेट प्रॉब्लम है। अब रिकॉर्डिंग बंद कौन करेगा? अपन सब रिमूव
मैम
हो
का
जाते
मैसेज आया नेट प्रॉब्लम।
ठीक है, मैं तो रिमूव हुआ। सब हो जाए तो रिकॉर्डिंग ऑफ हो जाएगी।
अरे रिकॉर्डिंग खराब मत।
मैम
yes, for the time being, the net was disconnected. And please note down the answer from the board.
नोटेड मैम।
Good. Let's understand how we can actually come to know
डन मैम।
various types of the soil.
नोटेड मैम।
It's okay, good that you have noted. Let everybody note down. Well, so in this case, what happened was that you can take up the soil from various areas. Maybe, say for example, in the garden wherein they had put the black soil recently, or maybe the roadside, and try to feel those sand particles between your fingers, keeping them wet. This is one. Second, that will give you a feeling of the particle size. That will give you the feeling of the particle size. And of course, if you want to understand the water holding capacity, or we want to know that which particular type of soil can be used to make toys or statues. If we want to understand that, we can take up various types of soils, sand and clay specifically, and we may add some water to that. Try to go for kneading, गूंदने की कोशिश करें. And once it takes up a shape, you try to give one shape or the other to that. You will come to know that sand cannot be used for making even a small, simple structure. Therefore, we need clay. So, why clay could be transformed or changed into various shapes? The reason is that it has smaller particles which can retain water in it, and if it has water, it is moist, it can be molded in various shapes, and once the shapes are given to all these articles, we can keep them for drying, and therefore we can have various shapes. In exam, 1 mark question is asked based on this. And that 1 mark question is that which particular type of soil is used to make toys or statues. The answer to that particular question will be, of course, clay. Sandy soil cannot be used for making any such structures. Try and understand the three. You may try to feel any soil sample around you, maybe garden. We have plenty of gardens in our colony. You can just have a look of the feel, touch it and feel it. You will clearly feel that certain particles are very, very minute, and others you can feel the coarseness in your fingers. That is roughness of it. That means those particles are larger in size. Now, what about this? What is the meaning of this being in a larger size or a smaller size? Say, for example, if you are talking about clay particles, and these particles are very, very close because they are small in size. If they are small in size, no air spaces. And there are no air spaces means that whatever water goes in, percolates is the word we use. 2 of the words we are going to add in our explanation in the next lecture: percolation and water holding capacity. This water holding capacity I wrote in one of the answers here also on the board in the Loamy Soil. How long it can keep the water, retain the water in it, and does not allow the water to drain out. That is the water holding capacity, and that is excellent in clay soil. Okay, but why loamy is preferred? Because we need some air spaces also for the roots to breathe. And if you're talking about sandy soil, the sandy soil will have larger particles, and these larger particles, you can imagine them as the balls, small white balls kept together, and there will be definitely gap between them. And that gap actually allows the air spaces. So this is what we need to understand for 3 types of soils: That is the sandy soil, the clayey soil, and the loamy soil. So that's all from my side today. We'll meet again and continue the chapter. Please keep reading. Kapil and
Ma'am,
Kapil.
blackboard is not clear.
Good that you have noted.